most shocking moment in late-night history. It started like any other evening on the show. The studio lights were hot, the audience was buzzing with energy, and Greg Gutfeld sat behind his desk with that signature smirk, ready to do what he does best. Tonight's guest was supposed to be a ratings goldmine. Prince Harry himself was making the rounds, promoting his latest project, and somehow his team had agreed to put him in the hot seat across from one of cable news's most unpredictable hosts. From the moment Harry walked out, something felt different. The audience gave him the obligatory applause, but there was a tension in the air. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, chin slightly elevated, or the way he barely acknowledged the crowd. Greg stood up, extended his hand for a shake, and the prince took it with what can only be described as the limpest handshake in television history. "Welcome to the show," Greg said, settling back into his chair. "Thanks for joining us tonight." Harry nodded, adjusting his jacket. "Thanks for having me." "So," Greg started, leaning forward with his elbows on the desk, "you've been making quite a few appearances lately. Lots to promote, lots to talk about. How are you finding America these days?" "It's been good," Harry replied, his tone clipped. "Much better than the alternative." Greg raised an eyebrow. The audience let out a small murmur. The alternative being? Well, being trapped in a system that doesn't value authenticity or freedom of expression. Harry crossed his legs, sitting back like he owned the place. "Right," Greg said slowly, nodding. "So you came to America, land of the free, to escape a system that doesn't value freedom. That's certainly one way to look at it." "It's not one way to look at it," Harry shot back, his voice sharpening. "It's the truth. Some of us have actually lived through things you couldn't possibly understand." The audience went quiet. Greg's smile didn't waver, but his eyes changed. Anyone who watched the show regularly knew that look. It was the look that came right before someone got verbally dissected on national television. "You're right," Greg said, his voice calm and measured. "I haven't lived your life. I grew up in a regular American family, worked regular jobs, and had to earn everything I have. So, no, I don't know what it's like to grow up in a palace with servants and titles and generational wealth. You got me there." Harry's jaw tightened. "That's incredibly reductive." "Is it?" Greg asked, genuinely curious now. "Help me understand then. Because from where I'm sitting, and from where millions of Americans are sitting at home right now, it looks like someone who had every advantage in life is traveling around the world, complaining about how hard he had. You have no idea what you're talking about," Harry said, his voice rising slightly. "The press, the scrutiny, the complete lack of privacy. Do you know what it's like to have your entire life dissected by strangers?" Greg gestured around the studio. "I'm literally on television right now, having millions of people watch and judge everything I say and do. So, yeah, I might have some idea. Difference is, I don't go on international tours complaining about it." The audience erupted in applause. Harry's face flushed red. "That's not the same thing at all," Harry protested over the noise. "You chose this. I was born into it." "You're right," Greg agreed, waiting for the applause to die down. "You were born into it. Born into wealth, privilege, opportunity. Born into a family that's literally famous for existing. And now you're sitting here, in a country where people work 3 jobs just to pay rent, telling us how tough you've had it. Do you see why that might be a hard sell?" "I never said I had it tougher than everyone else," Harry said defensively. "I'm just sharing my experience. At every possible opportunity," Greg added. "With books, interviews, documentaries, podcasts. It's almost like you're using the same media machine you claim to hate to make millions of dollars." Harry leaned forward, his composure starting to crack. "I'm using my platform to speak truth to power." "Your platform," Greg repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "The platform you inherited by birth." "That platform?" "You're twisting my words," Harry said, his voice tight. "I'm using your words," Greg corrected. "That's kind of how conversations work. You say something, I respond to it. And right now, what you're saying is that you're some kind of freedom fighter speaking truth to power, while simultaneously being one of the most powerful and privileged people on the planet. Do you not see the contradiction there?" The audience murmured in agreement. Harry shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "My wife and I have faced racism, harassment, and threats to our safety," Harry said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "Or does that not count as real problems in your worldview?" "Of course those are real problems," Greg said, his tone softening slightly. "Nobody's saying they're not. But here's the thing. You can acknowledge that you've faced genuine hardships while also acknowledging the incredible privileges you've had. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. The problem is, every time someone points out the privilege part, you act like they're attacking you. Because they are attacking me, Harry insisted. You're doing it right now. I'm asking you questions, Greg said calmly. If that feels like an attack, maybe that says something about the questions, or maybe it says something about how you've insulated yourself from any real pushback. Harry's eyes flashed with anger. You think you're so clever, don't you? Sitting there in your Dacolas, little cable news bubble, making jokes about people's lives. Little cable news bubble, Greg repeated, smiling now. That's good. Tell me, how many Americans watch this little bubble? I don't know, and I don't care, Harry snapped. Millions, Greg said. Millions of regular people who work hard, pay taxes, and don't spend their time complaining about how oppressed they are from their mansions in California. Those are the people watching right now. Those are the people you're talking to, and I gotta tell you, I don't think the message is landing the way you think it is. Harry stood up suddenly, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who's never accomplished anything meaningful in his life. The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members froze. Greg sat back in his chair, eyebrows raised, and for a moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched out, becoming almost unbearable. Never accomplished anything meaningful, Greg finally said, his voice quiet but cutting. You know what? You're right. I didn't inherit a title. I didn't get my job because of my last name. I worked in factories, I struggled to make rent, and I built my career one day at a time through actual work. So no, I didn't accomplish the very meaningful feat of being born into the right family. Guilty as charged. The audience exploded in applause and cheers. Harry stood there, realizing too late that he'd crossed a line. And you know what else? Greg continued, his voice rising above the noise. I've never abandoned my family on national television for a paycheck. I've never sold out my relatives to streaming services. I've never sat in a multi-million-dollar mansion and cried about how hard my life is. So if that's what you mean by meaningful accomplishments, then yeah, you're absolutely right. I haven't accomplished any of that. Harry's face was crimson now. You're putting words in my mouth. No, I'm putting your own actions in context, Greg said. There's a difference. Look, I get it. You're upset. You feel misunderstood. But coming on shows like this and acting like you're better than everyone else, like your problems are bigger than everyone else's, like people who question you are beneath you, that's not helping your cause. That's just proving everyone's point. I don't have to listen to this, Harry said, his voice shaking with rage. I came here for a civil conversation, not to be ambushed. You came here for a friendly platform to push your narrative, Greg corrected. But here's the thing about America. We don't bow to royalty. We ask questions. We push back. We expect people, no matter who they are, to be able to defend their positions. If you can't handle that, then maybe late-night television isn't for you. Harry pointed a finger at Greg. You know what your problem is? You're jealous. You're a jealous, small-minded person who tears others down because you can't build yourself up. Greg laughed, a genuine laugh that seemed to infuriate Harry even more. Jealous of what, exactly? Your life? Brother, I wouldn't trade places with you for all the tea in England. You seem absolutely miserable. How dare you, Harry sputtered, his composure completely gone now. You sit there with your smug face and your stupid jokes, and you think you're better than me, but you're not. You're nothing. You're a nobody who got lucky with a television show, and in 5 years, no one will remember your name. The audience gasped. Some people booed. Greg just sat there, nodding slowly, letting Harry's words hang in the air. You done? Greg asked quietly. Harry was breathing hard, his fists clenched at his sides. I'm done with this interview. Yes. Good, Greg said, because I think we're done here too. You came on this show, and I tried to have a real conversation with you. I asked you real questions that real people want answers to. And instead of engaging, instead of showing even a shred of humility or self-awareness, you insulted me, you insulted my audience, and you showed everyone exactly who you really are. I showed them who you are, Harry shot back. A bully with a microphone. A bully, Greg repeated, shaking his head. I asked you questions. You're the one who started throwing insults. You're the one who said I've never accomplished anything meaningful. You're the one who called me a nobody. But sure, I'm the bully. Harry started to respond, but Greg held up a hand. You know what the really sad part is? Greg continued. You could have been great. You were born with every advantage, every opportunity. You could have used your platform for genuine good without constantly playing the victim. You could have shown grace and humility. Instead, you chose this. You chose to cash in on family drama. You chose to make yourself the perpetual victim. And when someone asks you honest questions about it, you can't handle it. I don't have to take this abuse, Harry said, his voice breaking slightly. It's not abuse, Greg said firmly. It's accountability, and the fact that you can't tell the difference is exactly the problem. You've surrounded yourself with people who tell you you're right about everything, who validate every complaint, who never challenge you. So when you step outside that bubble and someone treats you like a regular person who has to answer tough questions, you fall apart. Harry grabbed his microphone pack and started yanking it off. I'm leaving. I think that's probably best, Greg said. But before you go, let me say one more thing. This country, the one you chose to move to, the one you claim to love so much, it was built on the idea that no one is above criticism. Not presidents, not celebrities, and definitely not princes. If you want to live here, if you want to be taken seriously here, you need to understand that. You don't get special treatment because of a title. Harry threw his microphone pack on. The chair. You're going to regret this. Greg smiled. Is that a threat? Because it kind of sounds like a threat. It's a promise, Harry said, his voice cold. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I think I have a pretty good idea, Greg replied. I'm dealing with someone who's used to getting his way, who expects everyone to treat him like he's special, and who throws a tantrum when that doesn't happen. Did I miss anything? Harry turned to walk off stage, but Greg wasn't done. You know what the funny thing is? Greg called after him. You came here to promote your message, to win people over, to show everyone how reasonable and relatable you are. And instead, you just proved every single criticism people have about you. So thanks for that. Really, thanks for making my job easier. Harry spun around, his face twisted with rage. You're a pathetic little man, hiding behind a desk. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in my world. Your world, Greg said, still calm, still composed. You mean the world where you grew up in castles and had everything handed to you? You're right. I wouldn't last 5 minutes there because I'd be bored out of my mind. I prefer the real world, where people actually have to work for things. Harry took a step back toward the desk, and for a moment, it looked like things might get physical. Security guards appeared at the edge of the stage, ready to intervene if necessary. Come on, then, Greg said, his voice taking on an edge now. Come back. Say what you want to say. But remember, all of this is on camera. Every word, every action. So think very carefully about what you do next. Harry stood there, trembling with fury, caught between his anger and the realization that he was on live television making a complete fool of himself. The audience was silent, watching this spectacular meltdown unfold in real time. You're trash. Harry finally spat out. You and this entire show. Trash. And yet, you begged to come on, Greg reminded him. Your people called my people. You wanted this platform. You wanted this audience. But the second you didn't get the softball interview you expected, the second someone asked you real questions, you couldn't handle it. I handled it just fine, Harry said, his voice shaking. Really? Greg gestured around the studio. Is this what handling it looks like? Standing on stage, throwing insults, threatening the host? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a complete breakdown. A producer appeared at the edge of the stage, speaking urgently to Harry. He waved them off angrily. You think you've won something here, Harry said, his voice dropping to something almost menacing. But you haven't. You've just made an enemy. Greg leaned forward, looking Harry directly in the eyes. I didn't make an enemy. I asked questions. If that's enough to make me your enemy, then you've got a lot of enemies. Maybe the problem isn't everyone else. Maybe, just maybe, the problem is you. That was it. That was the moment. Harry lunged forward, not quite at Greg, but close enough that security immediately swarmed in. The audience screamed. Cameras caught everything, and in that moment, whatever credibility or sympathy Harry had left evaporated completely. Security guards gently but firmly grabbed Harry's arms, guiding him away from the desk. He struggled against them, still yelling. Get your hands off me, Harry shouted. Do you know who I am? Yeah. One of the security guards muttered, loud enough for the microphones to catch. We know exactly who you are. They walked him backward toward the exit, and Harry continued his tirade. "This is assault," he yelled. "You're assaulting me. I'll sue all of you. I'll sue this network." Greg sat at his desk, watching the whole scene unfold with an expression somewhere between disbelief and vindication. He looked directly into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, Prince Harry," he said dryly. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or gasp. As Harry disappeared backstage, still shouting threats and insults, the studio fell into a stunned silence. Greg shuffled his papers, cleared his throat, and tried to regain some semblance of normalcy. "Well," he said, "that went about as well as expected." A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. "You know, when you book guests for a show like this, you hope for good television," Greg continued, finding his rhythm again. "You hope for interesting conversation, maybe a little debate, some back and forth. What you don't usually hope for is a complete meltdown followed by a near-physical altercation. But hey, we take what we can get." The audience laughed, the tension breaking slightly. "In all seriousness, though," Greg said, his tone shifting, "what you just saw is important, not because it was dramatic, not because it'll get clicks and views, but because it was real. That was a real person who's been on a very public campaign to control his narrative, completely losing control when faced with questions he didn't want to answer." He paused, making sure he had everyone's attention. "And I think that tells you everything you need to know," Greg continued. "When someone can't handle basic questions, when they resort to insults and threats, when they act like they're above accountability, that should make you wonder what they're really about. Are they really fighting for justice and truth like they claim? Or are they just angry that the world doesn't revolve around them anymore?" The audience applauded, slowly at first, then building to a standing ovation. "Now, I could sit here and tear into him more," Greg said, raising his hands to quiet the crowd. "I could list all the contradictions, all the hypocrisies, all the nonsense. But honestly, I don't need to. You all just watched it happen. You saw him claim to be the victim while acting like a bully. You saw him demand respect while showing none. You saw him prove every single point I was trying to make." He took a sip of water, letting his words sink in. "Here's the thing about America," Greg said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "We don't worship royalty here. We don't bow and scrape and pretend that someone is special just because of their bloodline. We had a whole revolution about that, if you remember your history. In America, you earn respect. You earn your place. And you definitely don't earn it by throwing tantrums on television when someone asks you tough questions. More applause." Greg smiled. "So to Prince Harry, if you're watching backstage, and I'm guessing you are, let me say this. I hope you're okay. I genuinely do. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But I also hope you take a long look in the mirror and ask yourself some hard questions. Why did you react that way? Why couldn't you handle a simple conversation? Why do you feel so attacked when someone treats you like a regular person?" He leaned back in his chair, looking relaxed now, in his element. "Because here's the truth," Greg said. "If you want to be a public figure, if you want to use your platform to influence people and change minds, you have to be able to handle criticism. You have to be able to defend your positions. You have to be willing to engage with people who disagree with you. And if you can't do that, if you fall apart at the first sign of pushback, then maybe the public stage isn't where you belong." The audience erupted again. Greg waited for them to settle. "Now, I know some people are going to say I was too hard on him," Greg continued. "They'll say I was disrespectful, that I didn't show proper deference to a member of the royal family. And to those people, I say this. Respect is a two-way street. You want respect? Show respect. You want to be treated well? Treat others well. You want honest conversation? Be honest." He came on this show and immediately started with the victim mentality, immediately got defensive, immediately acted like my questions were personal attacks. That's on him, not me. He shuffled his papers again, signaling a transition. "All right, we need to take a break," Greg said, looking into the camera. "When we come back, we'll try to get back to our regularly scheduled programming, assuming we still have a show after all this. Stay with us." The cameras cut, and the studio burst into excited chatter. Producers rushed around, phones glued to their ears. The audience buzzed with energy, everyone talking at once about what they'd just witnessed. Greg sat at his desk, surrounded by chaos, with the smallest smile on his face. Because whatever else happened, whatever fallout came from this, one thing was certain. This was going to be the most talked about interview of the year. And every single word of it proved exactly what he'd been saying all along. The prince came looking for a friendly platform and found accountability instead. He came expecting softball, questions, and got real journalism.